Google Consent Mode has been developed by Google in order to adhere to the Digital Markets Act, which is a regulation by the EU that is looking to level the playing field for digital players. Namely, Google is being able to collect so much information by default through their services such as Google Analytics, Conversion Linker, Floodlight, and also Google Ads. Essentially, Google Consent Mode is just another way to control the consent given by the user for information about them being tracked or not. Essentially, we need to enable Google Consent Mode because although the Digital Markets Act doesn't apply to us directly, it does apply to us indirectly through when we make use of this Google services. Essentially, is by March of 2024, we need to make sure that we have Google Consent Mode enabled in order to make sure that Google doesn't stop sending data onto our services as well. Namely, we have two modes, advanced and basic mode. The basic mode essentially is just as if you had a correctly configured cookie banner. If the user doesn't give consent, then no information at all is going to be sent to Google services. However, within the advanced mode, Google makes use of what we call cookieless pings. Cookieless pings are essentially information that is being sent to Google without the use of a cookie. Now, this restricts the amount of data that can be sent, namely because when we go from one website to another, that cookie is not present, and therefore information cannot be stored and tracked over time, but rather we can still send personal information about people through the URL or other attributes within a network request. So the question here is cookieless pings, the cookieless pings that are spent by Google, compliant or not? This is still up for debate. We still need information to be published by the regulators or by different decision boards in order to have a more clear understanding here. So whenever we implement Google Consent Mode, we need to make sure that we understand what are the implications of advanced versus the basic Google Consent configuration. Currently, our stance is that the advanced configuration is not fully compliant. Simply because there's information about the user that is being sent without their consent that is potentially personal data. So we're able to identify the user. There are some services and vendors online that offer anonymized cookieless data analytics solution, but it's very important to take into consideration the anonymized part of that phrase, because anonymized means that we cannot point back to an individual, the individual's identity with that information that we have in front of us. Namely, the problem is with the GLICD attribute that is being sent on those parameters to Google. So just for a quick recap, Google Consent Mode is introduced because Google wants to make sure that for traffic coming from the European Economic Area, there's a higher level of restriction when collecting information in order to comply with the Digital Markets Act. That said, Google is enforcing on users to implement this for people, for vendors or users that make use of Google services and get traffic from the EEA. If you don't do that, then you may see your data not being complete. And there's two ways in which we can implement this. The first one being the basic mode and then the advanced mode. The basic mode is much more restrictive. The advanced mode is less restrictive. It's also worth to note that in the advanced mode, Google will still use that information to give you some insights on your dashboard. Last but not least, if you want to comply with Google Consent Mode, our cookie banner makes it very easy. You can simply, with one click, enable Google Consent Mode, and we'll make sure that the information is being passed onto Google in the correct format and in the correct way. We'll also check that that is correctly connected for you. That said, you can claim a free GDPR audit here if you'd like to get the process kickstarted.